The original story Phantom of the Opera was written by Gaston Leroux in 1910. I've always loved the story and all of its many adaptations. But today, Johnnie Torch Reviews, 1943's Phantom of the Opera. This was the first talkie version of the film, I believe, after the classic version starring Lon Chaney in 1925. It's surprising that they waited so long to remake the popular story for sound, but the Chaney version was, and still is, revered as a masterpiece and would be nigh impossible to top, which is probably why Hollywood sat on the story for nearly 20 years. This version is oft overlooked, with the main criticism being that it boasts more opera than Phantom. They put all their chips on the appeal of popular opera-trained baritone Nelson Eddy by casting him as the star. Eddy was of course famous for several collaborations with the equally popular Jeanette MacDonald, in classic films such as Rose Marie and Maytime. Some may remember him from one of my favorite vignettes from Disney's Make Mine music, as he sang and narrated the tragic story of Willie the Whale that wanted to sing opera at the Met. Here he plays Anatole Guérin, the star of the Paris Opera, opposite the rising star Christine Dubois, played by Susanna Foster. This was probably Foster's only noteworthy role during her brief career, as she retired for all intents a few years after this film. Rounding out the cast is Edgar Barrier as Inspector Raoul, who is Christine's boyfriend, and is sort of an amalgamation of several characters from the novel. He's tasked with finding the mysterious Phantom, and ends up having a rivalry with Anatole for Christine's affections. Barrier was an accomplished actor and had several roles throughout the 40s and 50s. The Phantom himself is played by the peerless Claude Rains. Rains was, of course, no stranger to playing in horror films, playing Sir John Talbot in The Wolfman, and the title role of the Invisible Man, both for Universal, prior to this film. The film was directed by Arthur Lubin, who had directed some of Abbott and Costello's early classics such as Buck Privates and Hold That Ghost. He also directed the Francis the Talking Mule series, which he later reworked into the concept of Mr. Ed for television. The film is loosely based on the original story. While in the original the Phantom is born disfigured, here they give him an origin of sorts, a reason for his fall to madness. In this version, the Phantom is Henri Claudin, a violinist from the opera who has been secretly funding the object of his affection, Christine, in her burgeoning career as a soprano. After the maestro notices that Claudin is no longer performing up to the Paris Opera's lofty standards, he gets the boot. Having spent all his money, he attempts to sell the prized concerto he's been working on. In a mistaken belief that his work has been stolen, he kills the music publisher he believes wronged him. The publisher's assistant/girlfriend throws acid in Claudin's face, disfiguring him. That's a great classic scene, and Rains, consummate actor that he is, really sells it. This scene was also an inspiration for the famous scene in Batman '89, where Vicky Vale throws water in the Joker's face, and he reacts accordingly. In fact, Tim Burton based his lack of Batman in the '89 film on this film's lack of Phantom. Supposedly, it makes the protagonist more mysterious, but I don't really think it's particularly effective in either case. Claudin takes to the sewers under the Opera House, masking his disfigurement and becoming the Phantom. From there on, many iconic scenes from the story are depicted. The Phantom tries to warn off the opera's prima donna, Mademoiselle Biancarolli, eventually killing her. He speaks to Christine from behind the mirror, promising to make her a star. During an attempt to draw him out in the open, the Phantom sends a giant chandelier crashing down. In the confusion, he whisks Christine away to his underground lair where she can sing for him as he plays the piano. While there, Christine sneaks behind him and removes his mask, rather blandly recreating the unmasking scene in the 1925 classic. Raoul and Anatole give chase and save Christine as a massive cave-in sends Claudin to his doom. The film ends as Christine gives both guys the brush, as she decides to choose her career over either of them. Well, breaking it down, we'll start with the negatives. The film is more a vehicle for Nelson Eddy and plays for the fans of opera more than anything. There are some overly long musical numbers in the film where, if you're not a fan of operatic singing, you may find yourself reaching for that fast-forward button on more than one occasion. This tends to put the film's priorities in a strange direction. The film isn't really a horror story like the Chaney version. The Phantom doesn't really exist to shock and scare us. Rains' disfigured makeup is pretty good for the times and is also given the benefit of Technicolor, but it's hardly seen and not the most memorable visage when compared to Chaney. And the film isn't really a tragic love story like the Andrew Lloyd Webber version. Christine barely meets the Phantom here. When he speaks to her from behind the mirror, she believes it's Anatole speaking to her. She's hardly the Phantom's willing student. And the ending is so brief and rushed that she hasn't spent enough time with the Phantom to even register an opinion of him, much less have feelings for him. She seems to just pity him as a crazy old man, rather than the lovesick fool that gave his all and embraced madness over her. Supposedly, an early draft of the script would have a twist ending where Claudin would be revealed as Christine's father. Not sure why they would do that, but the evidence to support it would be the lullaby Claudin plays on his violin being the song Christine remembers from her people during her childhood. Thankfully, that twist was removed, but the script should have had another few rewrites to put their relationship back in the proper focus. There was also talk of this film getting a sequel for a time, but it never came to pass. Time for the final verdict. On the plus side, the film is beautifully shot in Technicolor, making it look very bright and vibrant, with the costumes displaying the kind of pageantry befitting of an opera. The cast is also very good, and Nelson Eddy is without a doubt a fantastic opera singer. Claude Rains gives a masterful performance, and you really feel for his Phantom in a way you don't particularly feel for Chaney's Phantom. Chaney's Phantom was a bit more monstrous than Rains. You get the sense that he hates a cruel mankind that views him as a freak. But Rains is more single-minded in his villainy. He's obsessed with Christine and generally only resorts to murder when it'll benefit his plans for her. His Phantom, more than any other adaptation, falls from grace by loving not wisely, but too well. Another major plus is Susanna Foster as Christine. She was an accomplished soprano, but moreover she brings a fresh face and playful innocence to the role that makes her the quintessential Christine. Despite all actresses to play the role, whenever somebody brings up the Phantom's Christine, Susanna's face is the one that pops into my head. I'm giving 1943's Phantom of the Opera 4.5 stars out of 5. This is Johnnie Torch reminding you, keep the flame burning brightly, and I'll be with you again real soon.